They can catch up.
Yeah, they'll catch up.
I didn't see any ketchup.
For the past several weeks, we've looked at Jesus' post-resurrection appearances. First, to the women. Last week, we looked at Paul when he was Saul of Tarsus. When he was, when God struck him with lightning to get his attention. Tonight, I want us to look at Jesus' appearance to the disciples without Thomas, and then again when Thomas was present. Have you ever wondered why it was so important for Jesus to restore and reinstate Peter and to convincingly convince Thomas that he was alive? And I thought about that, and I have at least my perspective on it. To me, it's like the Marines' code to leave no man behind. Marines will go to great lengths to retrieve a fallen comrade. And I think in the same way, Jesus was committed to retrieving those of his followers who needed to be brought back into the fellowship. He could not let Peter's denials or Thomas's doubt haunt them, define them, or prevent them from significant and productive service. And I want us to look at several things from John's brief narrative. First of all, on the evening of the resurrection day, because remember John wrote, on that day, that day of all days, on that day. The disciples were not together planning or strategizing. They were hiding out of fear. And Jesus suddenly appeared to them inside that locked room. The first thing Jesus did was to calm their fears. Peace be with you, he said. And that was not simply a greeting, but it was a calming intervention by Jesus. Someone said that every time Jesus did a miracle, his followers reacted in fear and terror. And that comes from experiencing the power of God. Experiencing the power of God ought to bring a fearful reaction in us. Because we know without a doubt that we've moved into the presence of the divine. You remember Isaiah, upon seeing the powerful and holy presence of God, he was terrified. He didn't say, "Oh, isn't this wonderful?" What he said was, "Woe to me! I am ruined." I like the way the King James puts it. "I am undone," he said. "For I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty." It is only after our initial reaction of shock and awe at the difference between God's terrible holiness and our unworthiness that God intervenes and says, "Peace be still. Don't be afraid. It's okay. I'm with you." There is another lesson to be learned from this event. And that is, you can never predict when Jesus is going to show up in a personal and powerful way. Though he is always present, There are those rare and precious times when he shows up in power and in an extraordinary fashion. Mother Teresa said that in all her years of being a devout follower of Jesus, she only had 3 distinct and powerful visitations by Jesus, where she felt the presence of God. Now, if Mother Teresa had 3, I'm looking for me. One, you know. So to have those moments where his presence is intensely and visibly manifest are exceedingly rare and unpredictable. And the reason for that is we are taught to walk by faith, not by experiences. Remember when Jesus and Peter, James, and John were on the mountaintop and Elijah showed up and Moses showed up and Peter said, "This is great, let's build a couple of tents and stay here and soak in the experience." Jesus said, "No, we need to go where the hurting people are." Experiences are nice, but you can't build your faith walk on experiences. Those incredible times of his showing up are, by definition, extraordinary times. And by the time Thomas had showed up at that gathering of the disciples, Jesus in the flesh was gone. And Thomas not only did not believe their witness, but he uttered these famous words: "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." And notice what doubting Thomas, here's this poor guy who followed Jesus for years, and he's known as doubting Thomas. But he was honest enough and perceptive enough to say, "I will not believe." You get that? I will not believe. I choose not to believe. To believe or not to believe is a decision we make. To believe or not believe is a choice that we make. Believing is not something that happens to us emotionally or intellectually, though emotions and intellect are part of what it means to believe. As the song says, I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided. I have made a choice. I will to believe that he is King of Kings and Lord of Lords and Lord of my life. Another thing we learn here is that our doubts and questions may not be answered instantaneously. Thomas lived with that doubt one excruciatingly long week until Jesus showed up again. See, doubt is not anti-faith. And Jesus did not condemn or criticize Thomas because he had doubt. When I was in sales, I was taught that every no is a request for more information. And that's what doubts are. Every doubt is a request for more revelation. I have this doubt. God, will you speak to me in this doubt? What is important is learning to doubt our doubts. not believe in and defend them so strongly that truth can't correct them. So hold on to your doubts lightly. And note too that Jesus said, Thomas, you're blessed because you see and believe. More blessed are those who don't, let me elaborate just a bit, who don't have the benefit of my actual physical presence and believe. See? Because Thomas's attitude was seeing is believing, and Jesus corrected that by saying, Thomas, believing is seeing. Jesus rescued Thomas from his doubt, and as we will see in a couple of weeks, he rescues Peter from his denials. He was restoring and rebuilding his team, not leaving anyone behind, not leaving anyone out because they struggled and they failed, but drawing them back into the fellowship. He wanted that team, that family, that community who had been with him since the beginning of his ministry to be together again. So what is the takeaway for us? Well, the first one is he may show up in the most at the most unexpected time, in the most unexpected way. And you can't plan for divine visitation. It's serendipitous. It's a surprise. It's a gift of grace. Secondly, he may not immediately take away our doubts, but doubts are okay. Doubts are not anti-faith. Doubts motivate us to learn and to grow and to deepen our faith. And finally, he seeks to restore the doubting, the struggling, the failing Christian because he has invested his life in your life. He's got a lot invested in you. And he doesn't want to lose you. And so when you doubt, when you struggle, when you fail, he calls you back. He calls you back into the warmth, into the closeness, into the intimacy, into that fellowship bond that he has with us. And the final point. If John, let me read what he wrote, and then let me just say a word about it, because this is a wonderful, wonderful quote. Jesus did many other miraculous signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name. And he said a little bit later, he said all the books in all the world couldn't contain the Jesus story. Here's my take on it. If John were to write everything he saw and everything he heard that convinced him that Jesus was raised from the dead, he would still be writing today. These might not have been learned men and women, but they weren't stupid men and women. They were people who knew what they saw and were totally and absolutely and life-changingly convinced that they saw and fellowship and spent time with and learned from the risen Christ. And if he was risen then and was alive then, he is still the risen Christ now and is alive now. And we are included in his fellowship. And he loves us. He loves us. He loves us. let's sing. Jesus, lover of my soul.